That's a great memory.
Good evening, everyone. The time is now 6 o'clock, and the Tuesday, July 8th, 2025 Kingsport City Schools Board of Education regular meeting is now called to order. It is my pleasure to invite a distinguished guest from Roosevelt Elementary to come to the front with Dr. True. I'm going to let you take it from here, Dr. True.
Thank you, Ms. Woods. I'm very excited, and welcome to everyone online, and also if you're with us this evening. I'm very excited to welcome Ms. Harmony Gordon with us tonight. Harmony you're going to be in the first grade at Roosevelt Elementary School this fall, correct? Is that right? Now, Harmony, we were talking a little bit earlier. You have been very, very busy this summer. What was it you were telling me that you had been doing a lot of this summer?
Swimming.
Swimming, a lot of good pool time. And what did you tell me you like to do most when you're in the pool?
Splashing.
Just splash around, which we agreed, given to the temperatures and the weather, it's been a great summer to splash around. And your mom just told us you're getting ready to go camping. Is that right? Are you excited about that?
Yes.
That's going to be fun. Well, Harmony, we are very glad you're with us tonight and excited that you're going to help lead the pledge. I'm going to ask everyone if you would please stand, and we're going to swing around. Harmony, the flag is right there. Okay.
Pledge allegiance
To the flag of
to the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Great job, Harmony. We are so glad that you were with us tonight. We hope you have a great rest of your summer and a great year of first grade at Roosevelt. Yes? Will you keep that principal over there in order? Yeah, keep him in line. Keep your eyes on him, okay? All right. Well, thank you for coming, Harmony. At this time, I would like to make a motion to approve the agenda as presented, which includes the agenda. Once the agenda is the consent agenda, once the agenda is accepted, the board mutually agrees not to discuss any item of business or take any action that has not been accepted for the agenda. Is there a motion for approval?
So moved.
Second. Okay. If you would cast your vote. Just a moment. Okay. All right, the motion passes. And at this time, I have a special presentation to make. I am currently the Northeast Tennessee District Director for the Tennessee School Board Association. And one of the responsibilities I have is to go and make presentations to boards who are awarded the Board of Distinction. And I am beyond thrilled to be able to recognize our own board, KCS, Kingsport City Schools Board of Education, as a TSBA Board of Distinction. This award is one of TSBA's most prestigious awards, and I really want to commend our board for doing the task necessary. We expect and really encourage some excellence in our entire district, and so we should expect the same thing out of us. So the requirements are extensive, and not every board qualifies as a board of distinction. However, this board is among those select few, and the four keys areas that the requirements are in areas of planning, policy, promotion, and board development. So on behalf of the Tennessee School Boards Association, I'm proud to present the Board of Distinction Award to the Kingsport Board of Education. Congratulations to all of you. So I want you all just to come up. We're going to get a picture together, and this will last actually for 3 years. We're going to replace that plaque that's there on that wall. And so I am so proud, and I don't mean that in a condescending way at all. I'm just so proud of the members of our board and for the investment that they're making in showing up and growing up, in becoming better board members. And we, as a better board, then we can better support our educators in our district and most of all our students. So congratulations, Board of Education. Okay. This is the time when members of the audience are invited to comment on agenda items. If pre-approved by the Board Executive Committee, members of the community may also address the board regarding non-agenda items. In order to speak on a topic not included on the agenda per Board Policy 1.404, you must submit a written request to the Superintendent of Schools at least 3 business days prior to the regular meeting. This is not the time to speak about personnel issues, as there are more appropriate ways in which these can be addressed. If you aren't sure how to do this, please ask a board member after the meeting. In your remarks, you may not refer to students by name without permission from a parent or guardian. Speakers are requested to first state your name and limit your remarks to a maximum of 3 minutes. So is there anyone who would like to address the board? Okay, seeing none, we will move on to our first business item of the evening, and that is consideration of the superintendent employment contract renewal. And I will tell you that the board has received the draft contract. Each one has had an opportunity to review the contract. Dr. Hampton and I have met. He has also received a copy of the contract, which was from our city attorney, Mr. Bart Rowlett. And so are there any items for discussion on that contract? Okay. Seeing none and hearing none, is there a motion for approval of Dr. Hampton's employment contract, for the renewal of his contract?
I'll make a motion.
Second?
Second.
Okay. Please cast your vote. The votes have been cast, and that was unanimous. And we just want to say thank you, Dr. Hampton, for everything that you're doing for our staff and for our administrators and educators, and mostly, again, our students. Okay, we will move right on to item 5.2, which is the approval of policies on first reading, and that is the policy king, Dr. Andy True. And he has a large stack.
It is a large stack. And I do want to thank you all for the opportunity to present, I guess, a large amount of policies to you, and just a little bit of backstory on that. We are subscribers to the TSBA policy service. They do a great job keeping us informed of changes we need to make. Their legal staff provides us draft language to include in our policies, and the vast majority of our policy is drafted with that in mind and with that support from TSBA. When it comes to what needs to be in the policy, how does it align with law, what changes do we need to make. We receive an annual update from them in normally towards the first part of June, first or second week of June is when they send their update. That includes all of the information that has come out of the legislature the prior winter. We were in kind of a situation this year with the timing of when that was received, the lack of a June work session. We're a little bit outside of our normal process of present and discuss at a work session, vote at a meeting. But there are several policies that we feel like we need to get in front of you before the school year starts. And as hard as it is to believe, we will not have another board meeting before the school year starts. So that's why we wanted to come to you with this stack of policies this evening to discuss. We're happy, there are other folks in the room, happy to answer questions. Hopefully you've had a chance to look them over and we can meet, we can have a discussion and meet your needs when it comes to information in order to vote tonight. I can tell you currently we are at 25 policies to consider this year. I think it went up by one this afternoon in talking with the city attorney. So we may be at 26. So I have 14 for you this evening, which is I don't think we have ever had 14 in one meeting. So I on some level apologize for that. On the other hand, it's going to give us a great head start as we work into the fall by talking about these tonight. Of those 14, 12 of them are revisions to current policies and 2 of them are new policies. And so when we kind of talk through these, we'll want to discuss with you procedures in order if you would elect to agree to accept and approve the 2 new policies on 1 reading. Typically we do 2 readings, but we have a process that you do have the latitude per our policies in order to actually approve policy and implement it on 1 reading. And so we'll talk about that a little later on. There's going to be a recommendation from us that on those 2 new policies, and we'll talk about the why, that we'll go ahead and recommend approval of those on 1 reading. So we'll talk that through. So please feel free to stop, ask questions as we go through this process. Again, I will try to kind of not linger through these, but I want to give them all the attention that you need and you want when it comes to addressing these. The vast majority of these, again, are going to be influenced by TSBA and are required changes that we need to make based on changes in law. And again, we'll kind of talk about that as we go through. So the first policy, if we go sequentially, if that's okay, just numerically in order, is policy 1.1021. This would be a new policy, student board member, and this is based on Public Chapter 359, that, again, legislature this year, that requires boards that operate at least 1 high school to adopt a policy authorizing a student board member. The selection of who that person will be, we've written that in the policy itself, that it will be used using criteria and procedures established by the superintendent of schools. I'm sure he will be consulting with board members, school administration on the best way to do that. But this policy would put in place a student representative, a non-voting student representative on the board as required by state law. That student, based on the policy, would be attending meetings. There's nothing in the law that states work session. It talks about meetings that are open to the public. And the term would last through the school year. And so that is being presented to you, again, new policy based on language from TSBA, and then, again, authorizing the superintendent to really determine the selection criteria, and that's 1.1021. 1.407 really is a revision that deals with records that are open to public inspection. Previously, the law stated that a request for inspecting records could be submitted by fax. That has been removed from the law, so we are removing that from our policy. And that's on line 19 and 20 there on page 1, that requests can be made in person by telephone, mail, or electronic transmission. Again, typically that would be email. There's a definition in TCA in your supporting document of what electronic transmission means, but fax has been taken out of that structure. So we have made a kind of a strike through on line 19 to take fax out of the request. Moving on, 1.700, school system goals. This really is in relation to Public Chapter 494. And that's a state law that removes the requirement for educator diversity goals. You're going to see this public chapter also dealt with in policy 5.100 later on, but really basically based on that removal of school system goals, and then on a hiring practice, striking the sentence that goals will be established for educator diversity. Again, Public Chapter 494 is what requires that to be stricken from our policy. 3.202, Emergency Preparedness Plan. This is a public chapter this year that clarifies and will really reduce the amount of evacuation fire drills that we do on a regular basis. Previously, our schools did 2 within the first 15 days and then 1 a month. The new law states that 1 has to be done every 30 school days, with no more than 2 occurring during the first 30 days of the school year. So instead, again, this is school days, 1 every 30 school days. So you're looking at 180 divided by 6 when you look at that. By 30 gets you to 6. So reducing the amount of full evacuation school drills, fire drills, and also the fact that, again, we kind of talked about this at our retreat today, this doesn't change any of the procedures on a fire drill where you have to identify that it is, we talked about this here, you have to identify it is not an active shooter kind of scenario. The procedures we put in place, still in place, it's just reducing the number of times over the course of the year, basically, that we'll be going through a fire drill procedure. So you see, again, a strike through on lines 9 through 12 of page 1 in new language for 3.202 to reflect that. Threat Assessment Team 3.204. This is one we want to specifically highlight because we want to start the communication process with you all and then with our community. There is a new requirement in public chapter, and that's attached, Public Chapter 215, that when we have situations where there are credible threats of violence or significant disruptive behavior directed toward or occurring on the grounds of a school, we are required by law to report those incidents and basically report that to the parents or guardians of that school within 48 hours. And so that is being added to the policy. We are really working through what that communication process will need to look like, especially up front, to let parents know. So if there is, again, the criteria in public chapter talks about credible threats of violence, and also if it's reported through or to a state or local law enforcement agency. All of the guidance that we've received legally, locally, and across the state, this would not necessarily come into play if an SRO was, for instance, investigating a situation. They are basically representing the school, but if it goes to KPD, then that would trigger, because it went to the law enforcement agency, it would trigger us a reporting responsibility to report to the parents of the school within 48 hours. We really want to make sure our community knows this is going to happen. Obviously, we want to be very transparent. We have always worked to be transparent with our community, but to know that there may be more frequency now. Obviously, the vast majority of time we're investigating these things, they turn out to be non-issues. Certainly, we want to be able to communicate that to our community as well. But this is now a legal requirement. We want to make sure our community knows this is going to be coming, that if there is a threat of a credible threat and it involves law enforcement, that we will be reporting that to the parents of the particular school where that threat exists. Questions on that? Again, that front-end communication we feel is very important to be able to, so folks will know that's coming. 4.101. This is going to be similar wording that you're going to see referenced in 2 additional policies beyond 4.101. And there's a requirement in Public Chapter 293 that requires boards in your policy to include the definition specifically of anti-Semitism and anti-discrimination policies. So you can see we've added lines 5 through 9, basically stating a first statement, again, and this is taken straight from Public Chapter, that the board will not discriminate on the basis of race, color, religion, again, that's going to be an umbrella term there, sex, national origin, or disability in its instructional programs. The law then goes a step further when you're looking at the Public Chapter and requires that a definition of anti-Semitism be placed in the actual policy. And so whereas the first sentence kind of, again, talks about religion in general, the law requires you go into a specific definition of anti-Semitism. Again, that's spelled out in the Public Chapter. And so what the definition is actually spelled out in public chapter, and so we have included that as well in that policy. Again, you'll see this 2 more times. The other 2 policies on discrimination reference back to the definition listed in 4.101. Okay. 5.100, personnel goals. This goes back to that policy we talked about earlier when it comes to diversity. The statute states that an LEA shall not base any employment decision on any metric that considers an applicant's or employee's race, ethnicity, sex, age, or any other similar demographic characteristic, rather than on individual merit, qualifications, veteran status, or lawful eligibility criteria. So that has been then reflected here in this on lines 7 and 8. When it comes to the superintendent is expected to hire, recruit, and employ the best qualified individuals to staff the school district. Hiring decisions shall be based on merit rather than any other metric. So just, again, lifted straight from Public Chapter 494. 5.305, family medical leave. This goes back to a policy that, and a law that was passed, they call it a cleanup bill, previously giving 6 weeks of paid leave for paternity and maternity leave. What this cleanup bill, it gives some further definition of who is eligible. I think probably from a practical standpoint, what it even further clarifies for us is how that leave can be taken. Previously, there were not restrictions on that. Think about how that could create scenarios in a workplace with folks taking leave here, there, kind of scattered. This cleans that up in that the leave doesn't have to be taken consecutively, but you can take no less than 1 week at a time. So if you're going to take that 6 weeks of leave, you could take it in 1 week blocks, but you can't take a day here, day here, day here, day here. And so that is being clarified then on page 2. Paid leave shall either be taken consecutively, except there is a kind of an extenuating circumstances by the superintendent, or taken non-consecutively, but in increments of no less than 1 week. So that clarifies that. 5.500, discrimination, harassment of employees. Again, this is one of those policies that were required to add that definition of anti-Semitism. Instead of including the whole definition in working with TSBA, they basically just state you go ahead and just reference where it's defined in previous policy. And so we've included that in there on line 2, including the definition found in policy 4.101. Interrogations and searches is 6.303. A lot of discussion on this one, again, with our administrators, working with them as we've gone through the summer, and especially as we are together, for instance, today. Really, one of the main pieces of this to consider is that it gives some clarity on searches, but there is, as far as who can do the search, but also there's, or by law, a required training for those individuals to search. That, by law, again in the statute, states that that training will be provided to us. It has not yet been provided to us. So we are still waiting for the state to provide that training. But again, once they do that, the statute states that the search can be done by a school resource officer, a school security officer, or school administrator who has completed the training. We're still waiting on the training. But that's something we'll continue with Mr. Nash and our administrators to really work, make sure that all that training occurs and our school level has what they need to do that. Again, there were a couple of questions on this particular policy as far as what can be searched. That is spelled out in law. It's spelled out specifically in, I've got them, 49.6 is where it starts, 49.6, 4204. Basically that a principal can order vehicles parked on school property, students or visitors, containers, packages, lockers, or other enclosures. So that is in law where it's spelled out, and we refer back to line 23 on page 1. The school principal shall authorize all searches at the outset per state law. That's worded that way so that if there is any change to the law, we don't have to go back and change the policy. Basically, it just refers to what's in law. So that, and then another question was asked about a definition of reasonable time. That's stated in the policy as well, that on the second page, that if a student is under the age of 18, the principal must notify the student's parent or guardian within a reasonable time of the search. Reasonable time of the search is the exact term that was used in public chapter. And so we will obviously do our best effort, but there could be extenuating circumstances, ability to reach a parent, time of day, those sorts of things. But we obviously will be working to, in a diligent way, provide notification in that scenario. So I know there's some question about what is reasonable time. Law does not define reasonable time. It just says reasonable time. Then we're at 6.304. This is another one of those referencing anti-discrimination and the definition of anti-Semitism found in 4.101. So that's on line 3 and 4 of that 6.304 on student discrimination, harassment, bullying, cyberbullying, and intimidation. One of the policies that has probably involved the most discussion externally in our community as a board, internally, is 6.312. This is a new policy, use of wireless communication devices. And again, this comes out of the legislature this year that requires districts to pass a policy limiting the use of wireless communication devices in schools. So what is being presented to you tonight is the administrative recommendation after lots of communication and conversations between school level and district level administrators, and that this policy would prohibit and require wireless communication devices to be stored through the totality of the school day, from the beginning of the school day to the end of the school day. I know there's been a lot of discussions about can they be used in non-instructional time. It's our recommendation that the policy include that it goes from the beginning of the school day to the end of the school day. Now, there are legally in the statute some exceptions to that, and those are on page 1 there of the draft policy. Emergency when authorized by a teacher to manage students' health as documented in an individualized healthcare plan. If the use is in a 504, a student's individual education program, or if the device is being used by a student with a disability for operation of assistive technology. The law does allow for confiscation. Our administrators right now are continuing to work through what the specific consequences will look like, but the law does allow for that. And so I think especially our high school administrators, because this really doesn't affect our pre-K-8 procedure. Our procedures previously on our student handbook for pre-K-8 were that things had to be put away for the whole school day. It's really, the change is going to be at the high school level. Again, this is another one of those we know there's going to need to be a lot of communication about this and making sure parents are aware, making sure students are aware, and those when we talk about consequences, what can be involved in that. So those details right now are still, I think we're close to finalizing those with our administrators. Again, a lot of conversations about that, but I know we're looking at kind of a multi-tiered structure when it comes to first offense, second offense, those sorts of things. But trying to really communicate this in a way that will make it very clear right from the start that this is not you can have it out at lunch kind of scenario. This is from the beginning of the day to the end of the day. Our recommendation, based, pending your approval, is that be the approach that we take when it comes to limiting use of electronic devices. And I know you may have questions. Let me go one thing. I'm sorry to kind of ramble here. Definition of an electronic communication, a wireless communication device, is specifically in code and has been again in the policy here. Any portable wireless device that has the capacity to provide voice, messaging, or other data communication between two or more parties, such as, again, kind of an umbrella term, wearable technology. We know what wearable technology is today. We don't know what it will be 6 weeks, 6 months from now. So that's why that umbrella term is used, to not really look specifically at an individual piece of wearable technology. The wearable technology, cell phones, headphones, laptops, tablets, and gaming devices. I think typically we think of this as being a cell phone policy, but there are other things for that communication piece that are being accounted for in the law and in this policy.
Yeah. My only request would be, and thank you for being so thorough in your explanation, My only request would be when those administrative procedures are approved, and I'm sure they'll be in the student handbook and that will be heavily communicated.
Correct.
If you would just get that back to us as a board, so
Absolutely.
if we get phone calls or whatever, we'll all be singing from the same song.
I think we can identify today kind of what some of those pieces are that are probably going to be more hot button issues for parents. Cell phones obviously are going to be something. We think about things like, earphones, smartwatches, those sorts of things. They fall under the definition per law. And so we want to make sure our community knows those things. We can minimize the issues that may occur at the high school level in those first few days of school until we kind of get this rolling. I will say this, I know Dr. Tate and Dr. Hampton have had a lot of communication with other superintendents, other administrators. Those that have gone this route speak pretty highly, I don't want to put words in your mouth, Dr. Hampton, highly of the result of going through the process to make it more familiar, and that on the back end, it has the expectation and what we've seen other places is greatly improved the environment in the school.
Well, even last year at the state convention, there were some districts who had implemented this policy previous to the legislation passing. And they spoke very positively about the results. Initially the first month, there was pushback from students, from parents, from the community, so to speak. But once that initial pushback ended, they talked of classroom engagement going up, test scores going up, referrals, behavioral issues going down significantly. I mean, they had a lot of information, and one of the board presidents from, I think it might have been Wilson County, I'm not sure which. Anyway, he sent me data that really supported that it was a positive decision for their district. So I hope that will be the same for us as well.
Appreciative of the fact that we have state law to back this. This is not just a unilateral. This is law. So.
I do have a question. I'm sorry that I sent you so many questions too.
Hopefully we're answering them as we go.
Oh yes, you're doing great.
Okay.
Great, it's awesome. But I did think of another one because my special ed background. So students that have IEPs and 504s, now that this is going to be in place, those students that may have a hearing aid device or a diabetic monitor, that their phone would give them alerts. Obviously, they would be students that would be exempted from this. But those students, are we gonna consider in their 504 plan or their IEB plan about writing something in to safeguard them from? This doesn't mean you can get on Snapchat. This doesn't mean that you can be using your device in a way that is not related to the reason that we're allowing you to have it. Is there any language that we're considering for that?
I can't speak to specific language. I will say the Megan Jones of the world, our special ed director, has been very well versed and familiar with this. Dr. Cinnamon, Dr. Nash have been working in special ed previously, thinking through those things and working to make sure that there's clarity as they have those meetings as you move forward. And I think that's a great point, making sure that there's full understanding of the needs that are going to exist and are accounted for in the law for those individual children that have needs in those ways. Okay, student wellness is 6.411. This is coming out of the legislation that increases at the elementary level the amount of unstructured play, unstructured physical activity. Now it is required that elementary school students shall have a minimum of 40 minutes of physical activity each school day. Middle and high school students shall receive a minimum of 90 minutes, which is what it was for physical activity each school week. So again, this is one of those situations where our school level administrators, our district level administrators at those levels have all been having conversations for quite some time about how to meet that, what needs to happen from a scheduling standpoint. And so that will be implemented in individual ways as we go through the course of the year. I think there were already some great things going on at the middle school level, high school level that were being done. I was looking at a plan that the middle school had been utilizing this past year, and it's really well developed of what they do to be able to allow for that physical activity to take place. Elementary probably has a little more flexibility, and I say that not because they just have all this much time, but recess becomes now 40 minutes long instead of maybe 30. So it's just adding that extra time in that they can do that just with the structure of their day. Interesting things in the law, again, it needs to be outside according to the law if weather permits. That's an interesting specific detail that's included in the law. And then it also talks about things that are not included in there, like time spent on an electronic device or a PE class. And so that's been included in the policy as well. So that's 6.411.
I will say this is a policy that we as a board have followed. We followed from beginning to end. And I asked a lot of questions during the process, none of which were answered. And it's just very frustrating. I'm going to try to be as nice as I can, but it's very frustrating when public education continues to have these state mandated requirements. And we want our students to be proficient in all areas. We want them to be healthy. We want them to be happy. We want them to be, complete. And I understand the desire for more physical activity. However, that additional time that we're going to allow unstructured play outside, et cetera, that's time taken away from investing in our math skills, investing in our reading skills, et cetera. And as the law states, the school day is not to be extended. And it's just very frustrating for especially a legislator who is educated privately and who educates his kids privately to continue to hound on public education. I know I'm kind of going off on a tangent a little bit here, but it's extremely frustrating that public education continues to be targeted on these ways. Of course we want playtime for our students. Of course we do. But there are only so many hours in the day, and we continue to expect more and more of our educators and give them less and less. We give them less money, we give them less time, we're giving them less support. It is just extremely frustrating to me that we continue to go down this pathway. These requirements are not passed on to private schools, and it's only public schools. And I know I am preaching to the choir here. I fully am aware of that, but I think our listeners need to know, our readers need to know that this kind of legislation that's being passed is very unfair to public education. And our voice is our vote. And so I just encourage you to continue to reach out to our representatives. If you don't know who they are, we'll be happy to pass that information along to you. But they need to know that these are unfair practices that continue to be shoved down the throats of public education. And yet we are supposed to be competing on an uneven playing field, and this just continues to make it less and less even. So I will stop now.
Our last policy is 6.600 on student records. Fairly simple revision. When a student transfers from a school either within the district or outside the district to the district, we now have a 5-day, basically a 5-day business day requirement in order to provide records once that request is received. Again, that has some trickle down when you think about generally there's an individual at the school that handles that. During the school year, that may not be much of an issue. What happens in the summer when that person's on vacation kind of scenario. So those are things, Mr. Nash is kind of our director when it comes to records, working through what backstops, what redundancies need to occur at the school level. So when you have those situations, we can meet that 5 business day requirement. But that just basically changes the wording and that we have to respond to requests for records within 5 days. Apologies for rambling on so long, but thank you for letting me work through all of those. Those are the 14. And we kind of have a process that we've talked about in order to attack these from a vote standpoint. But happy to answer any other questions or give you any other information about any of them.
Okay. Any questions before we begin the process of approval? Okay, so what we will do is we're going to kind of handle this in 3 waves. The initial motion that I'm going to ask for is to approve the policies that are only revised policies. So the 12 policies that are revisions. The first motion that I'll ask for will be for those approvals. So I'm going to do that now. Is there a motion to approve on first reading the revised policies as presented tonight?
I'll make a motion.
Okay, second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor, I guess cast your votes here.
I've got to type these in. So to approve on first reading the policies.
The revised policy. Mhm.
policies. Okay. Okay, motion was made by,
Mrs. Jackson. Mhm.
seconded by, and then you should be able to vote.
Okay. Thank you for being so flexible, Ms. Altizer.
Okay, and I can do that. And we will do,
Okay, so the next, and
Results
that
of
was,
that
those passed unanimously? Okay, that motion carried. So the next motion I'm going to ask for is to dispense with the second reading and to pass and adopt 2 new policies on first reading. So is there a motion for that?
I'm sorry to interrupt. Just to clarify, this is just a motion that, this isn't a motion to accept the policies. This is just a motion that we're dispensing with the need for a second reading.
Correct.
Okay, I'm getting a nod from the city attorney.
Okay.
Sorry.
Okay.
on first, to dispense of second reading,
Mhm.
to adopt new policies.
The need for a second.
On the first reading.
To adopt the need.
To dispense with the need for a second reading, to adopt the 2 proposed new policies.
Okay. Yes? Okay, so is there a motion to dispense with the need for a second reading and to pass and adopt the 2 new policies on first reading?
Motion.
Second?
Second.
Okay. If you would cast your vote. Okay, wonderful. So the motion carries. Okay. And so now, the final motion that I will ask is to approve and adopt the 2 new policies, 1.1021 and 6.312, our new policies on first reading. Is there a motion for approval?
So moved.
Second? Okay. If you would cast your vote. Yes. Okay, motion carries. Excellent. Thank you, Dr. True. Thank you so much. Actually, I think I appreciate the board coming prepared, and obviously you had reviewed those policies prior to tonight and asked any pertinent questions, so appreciate that. And so our next meeting will actually be, we'll have a work session on July 22nd. Some of us will be attending TSBA Summer Law Institute in Gatlinburg, July 18th and 19th. And then our next regular business meeting will be August 12th, and we have a fall district meeting, and I think we will be recognized as a board of distinction at that meeting. So if you could mark your calendars, board members, August 25th, that's going to be in Hamlin County, and it's 5 o'clock, so that's a kind of a trek down there. But if possible, I would love for us all to be able to be there and to, because you work to earn that honor, and so I'd like for everybody to be able to be there if possible. Also, we're going to have some new teachers coming in here pretty soon, here in July, and then we'll have convocation. I cannot believe we're talking about that already, but convocation, one of the best days, in my opinion, of the entire year. So that's going to be on the 29th at the Eastman Employee Center. Yes, Toya free. So, okay, is there any other items for discussion? We wish our administrators well as they're going through their retreat.
2 more days.
2 more days of retreat. So thank you so much for putting in the time, energy, and effort for a new school year. Okay, there's nothing else, then we are adjourned. Roll Tribe.